Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. Can you all hear me? Brilliant. That was a bit of an issue last time. Thank you so much for your patience with us. I feel like we can't really have a conference without there being some sort of tech problem, so thank you for bearing with us. Thank you, Mohammadi, also for your opening remarks and the introduction to the MRN. We're so excited to have you all here with us today. I've had the pleasure of saying salam to some of you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this conference, and I hope you enjoy it and take a lot from it, inshallah. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. If you need anything during the day, we have a bunch of volunteers on hand to help you with any queries or problems or issues that you have. I will now introduce our first speaker. So our first research speaker for today is Dr. Omar Abdel-Mannan, who is talking about the state of international medical aid, inshallah. So Dr. Abdel-Mannan graduated from Oxford University in 2011 after reading medicine at St. John's College. He's currently completing a PhD at UCL in the Institute of Neurology on Paediatric Multiple Sclerosis. In addition, he is also the co-founder of the British-Egyptian telemedicine startup, and is also the co-founder of Gaza Medic Voices and Health Workers for Palestine. So using his experience and first-hand exposure, he will join us to give a talk on the state of international medical aid with using the case of Gaza.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, first of all, to Mohammadi, the MRN Network Committee, for inviting me to speak. It's a real honor and privilege. I think I spoke last year or the year before in UCL, and it's great to be here in Cambridge. It was difficult to come to the dark side, but I've had to do that. Mohammadi betrayed us a long time ago. He used to study in Oxford, but he won't tell you that. So what I want to talk about today is actually completely unrelated to my research. As my PhD supervisors quite clearly know and are somewhat miffed that I've been spending my time doing this rather than my PhD. But anyway, as Mohammadi said, I'm a paediatric neurologist. I'm based at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, but also doing a PhD at UCL. And in my spare time, which has become my full-time job really, I have been trying to advocate and lobby and amplify the voices of medics in Gaza who I've built very strong relationships with, which I'll come to a bit later. So this is a structure, an outline of my presentation. So I'll start off by talking about what was the state of healthcare in Gaza before the 7th of October. I think that's very crucial because, as we know, history did not start on the 7th of October. Secondly, what is the current healthcare situation in Gaza as of today? And I can give you some updates literally as of today. Thirdly, we'll talk about the current state of humanitarian aid, which I'm not an expert in, but I can tell you some of the organizations' work that they are doing and some of the future work as well that is happening. And then I'll quickly talk about what work we have done, our organizations so far to help, and where do we go next? Where can you help from here on? So I just want to give a disclaimer. There will be some extremely graphic pictures at some point, but I will tell people beforehand. So if you want to close your eyes, walk out of the room, feel free. I'm sorry to do this, but I think it is important. I think people need to see these pictures. So apologies in advance for anyone who's not happy with that. So I'll start off by talking about the situation pre-7th of October. And I think it's really important to start with this quote, which is from the WHO's Commission on the Social Determinants of Health. What's ironic is these slides, many of them I presented in 2015-16 at a similar talk in St. Anthony's College in Oxford. And the sad thing is very little has changed. So, the slides are literally very much the same. So this states the conditions in which people live and work can help to create or destroy their health. This is so apt for the current situation. For those who don't know and those who have not been to Gaza, which I suspect is 99.9% of the people in this room, Gaza is not a country, it's not a state. It's a tiny strip of land just north of Egypt and surrounded by Israel on all borders, and the Rafah crossing at the bottom is where the Egyptian border is. You probably have come across a lot of the names of these cities. So Khan Yunis, Gaza City, these are the main hubs or metropolitan hubs within Gaza. And what's important is, and this is crucial, is the density of the population in Gaza is probably one of the most dense metropolises on the planet. We have a population in 2000, which was 1.1 million. We have a population as of 2020 and 2023 is 2.3 million now. So it's an exploding population, and I don't know the average number of births, but it is high in Gaza. People have multiple children. Palestinians do anyway, so the population is ever increasing. And then crucially, if you can see here, the north of Gaza, Gaza City, and the south have different densities. Obviously, the greatest is in Gaza City. And again, this will come back to later. And you can see by size comparison, this is Greater London, and this is what the Gaza Strip would look like across London. So London is what, 8 million, 9 million people? So you've got 2.3 million people condensed into this tiny strip of land. And now, technically, this area is actually the area that is livable. Or when I say livable, livable-ish. And I think the political timeline is crucial, just to give some context for those who are not aware, and I know many of you are. So this did not start on the 7th of October, this started 150 years ago. And it didn't even start with the Balfour Declaration, but that was the first step towards the Zionist colonialist project of colonizing Palestine. Then we had the British involvement, the Arab-Israeli War in 48, the 67, the Nakba in 1948, which is the displacement of 700, 800,000 Palestinians, many of whom are spread around the world in the diaspora. Then you had the 67 Six-Day War, which was a complete defeat for the Arab world. And you had the 73 return of Sinai. And then we had the Oslo Accords, Yasser Arafat. We had, in the early 2000s, the Intifada, Second Intifada. And then, most crucially to this current context, was Hamas winning free and fair elections in 2007, 2006, and then it descending into a bloodbath between Fatah and Hamas, and then taking over in 2007. And since that date, 2007, Gaza has been under siege by the Israeli occupation forces, continuously. Siege by air, by land, by sea. Everything that goes into Gaza is controlled by the Israelis and the Egyptians, somewhat, except for the oxygen. That's the one thing they can't control. Everything else is controlled. So moving on to healthcare, just a brief summary of how healthcare is set up there. So you had a very disjointed service from the days of the Christian missionaries in 1948, around the time of the Nakba, who were providing medical aid. And in the 60s, the Gaza Strip was very much dependent on Israel and had very poor funding. The Palestinian Ministry of Health, after Oslo, which was formed, then increased the capacity of beds over 10 years by 50%, but there was neglect, poor management, corruption, very apt in that area, and a dependence on referrals abroad. So any complex cases needed to go to Israel, to Gaza, to Jordan. Now, the key thing about this is not to 2023, this is 2018. Total collapse of Gazan healthcare is imminent. The UN says hospitals have already begun to close. Without funding, more service providers will be forced to suspend operations. Again, February 2018. Donald Trump cutting funding for Palestinian refugees could lead to a disaster. This is all 4 or 5 years ago. This situation has been ongoing for decades. And what were the main threats to health in Gaza? First, it was human security. So human security is crucial, obviously, as per the WHO definition of health. We had direct threats to health. That means IDF airstrikes, 5 escalations since 2007. We had problems with houses being destroyed, sewage being left out in the open. So all the stuff that can lead to infectious diseases. And then you have indirect threats to health. So you have sonic booms from Israeli airplanes or drones buzzing and causing this constant noise that has led to children having bedwetting or children having psychological trauma. Malnutrition, and I'll come back to that. Movement restriction. 99% of the population of Gaza have never left Gaza, have never left that strip of land because it's restricted. And power cuts, which again I'll come back to. This was an account from 2009 after Operation Cast Lead, which at the time, was atrocious, but pales in comparison to what we are seeing now. You can read this for yourself, but basically it's a account from doctors saying a 4-year-old Salma Abed Rabbu has suffered a large shrapnel injury to her back. Abandoned in the hospital corridor, she quietly whispers, "Mama, mama, mama." Her family members remain at home stranded due to the heavy military bombardment in the area. So this is 2008, this is not 2023. Let's talk about power cuts. 2006 to 2016, you can see that electricity was available between 8 to 12 hours a day inside Gaza. By 2017, which is the last time I looked this up, we had 2 to 4 hours of electricity per day. So power cuts are not a new thing. This is daily bread and butter for people in Gaza. And what does power cuts actually lead to? What's the problem with having a power cut? Well, Israel and the Palestinian authorities were unwilling to supply fuel at that time. Critical services faced closure. Neonatal and adult intensive cares in hospital rely on fuel for generators, which then power their electricity. And we'll come back to that. Hemodialysis for patients that need kidney filtration, and refrigerated blood products, vaccine stocks, these are all at risk every time there was a power cut. And these are some pictures from inside Gaza. You can see the neonatal units, the hemodialysis units, the chemotherapy units. These are all relying on machines that rely on electricity. So when you cut the power, you really cut and suffocate to the life to these people. So don't take it from me, take it from Medical Aid to Palestinians, a very well-renowned charity. They've said, this is again 2017, Gaza is facing the worst healthcare crisis in a generation due to closure of borders, delays in medical referrals, difficulties in medical professionals going abroad to train, difficulties for international experts to visit, and outdated medical equipment. And again, over a third of essential zero-stock drugs, essential drugs, were chronically unavailable, making treatment for many conditions, including chemotherapy, extremely difficult for people in Gaza. And other challenges to healthcare access. Basic tertiary care was available, but complex cases, complex oncology, pediatric cases that need quaternary services could not access that. They would have to go to East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Jordan, Israel, or Egypt. And there was WHO had reported a reduction in the approved permits for medical transfers outside of Gaza, leading up to 2023. In 2017, it had dropped to 55% of applications being approved. 54 Gazan patients died in 2017 following denial or delay to exit permits. This was happening. We saw this. And then I want to talk briefly about malnutrition, and it's relevant to this day and age as well. So poverty and poor health are very much interlinked, social determinants of health. And it's like a vicious cycle. So you have acute and chronic malnutrition. And in Gaza, there were cases of growth stunting, rickets, increases 50% in 10 years from 2007 to 2017. And there's long-term effects to immunity, to physical and neurodevelopment and cognitive outcomes for these children. These were the sort of children that we're seeing. I mean, not on the scale of, Somalia in the 90s, but we are talking about cases of acute malnutrition and chronic malnutrition. Again, the health effects on children, congenital defects. Research has shown that the number of babies born with congenital defects was high. Mental health effects. Some of the highest rates of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation in the world were inside Gaza. And Gazans have this, and Palestinians have this concept of sumud, which is like, patience. And patience when you're at the most extreme in terms of you're being attacked. But that does not protect them from mental health disorders. Palestinians had the highest rates of mental health disorders. Children were having bedwetting, poor academic performance, anxiety. These were caused by 17 years of siege and 75 years of occupation. And again, this is a quote from Dr. Semi Aweda, again in 2017, saying, "People see no reason for optimism. They are trapped in a large prison." I would correct that. It's not a large prison. It's a large open-air concentration camp. There is no horizon, no political solutions. The people anticipate the new military assault. It is always on their minds. Nothing will help except ending the blockade and giving dignity back to the people. This is 2017. Again, like I said, the conditions in which people live and work can help to create or destroy their health. Okay, let's talk about now. This is where it gets graphic. So I'm sorry for this, but if you don't want to see it, feel free to walk out. I'm going to start with some cases, one specific case, and this has hit home quite hard for me as a pediatrician, as someone and a father who looks after children at home and in the workplace. So this child, Lu'ay, was sent to us because we are in the midst of trying to organize a program of bringing children from Gaza via Egypt and Jordan to the UK to provide them with tertiary, quaternary care at some of the top hospitals in London and around the UK. And this case was given to us as a primary case that needed to come across. So this is Lu'ay, 3 years old. On the 4th of December, he sustained extensive burns from an explosive injury at his house, which involved his lower limbs, his genitalia, his perineum, his lower buttocks. So the whole area from the navel down, completely burnt. 50% of his total body surface area was burnt. 3rd-degree burns with charring and complete destructions of his genitals. On the 10th of December, he had a massive debridement done at Al-Shifa Hospital, or I think one of the other hospitals in Gaza, by the local surgeons who did an amazing job for people working in a war zone. On the 12th of December, he was transferred to Egypt. He was put on as a priority that needs to come out. He had a colostomy, which essentially is an operation that you have when you basically can't pass stool or feces through the back passage. So essentially that they have to get it out through a colostomy. He had a suprapubic catheter to allow him to urinate because, again, no genitalia. And the background is his mother was in critical condition in Gaza. She's actually died since. His maternal aunt was his only guide in Egypt, and the family did not have any contact with the father who lives in Egypt, and I don't think he's aware that what his son's state was. So I'm sorry about this, but this is literally the injuries that he suffered. So these are actually consistent with white phosphorus burns, and we only found that out after it was sent to us. We sent it on to the ICJP, and they're actually investigating this and using this to hopefully, bring up a case against the Israeli army. On the 25th of December, he passed away. And he was transferred from Egypt to Qatar. He stayed in Qatar for 2-3 days. We still don't know why he was transferred. To be honest with you, I think it was rubbish medicine. I think they should not have transferred him. I don't think he was stable enough. I think the Egyptians were trying to push him out. That's my feeling. I don't know why. And so when he got to Qatar, he's very unstable because when you transfer patients who are acutely unwell, you put them at risk of becoming more unstable. And Allah yarhamu, he passed away. This is one example case. Again, more graphic pictures coming up. Sorry. So these are the sorts of injuries that we're seeing in children in Gaza. Children with facial burns, absolute destruction. These children will be scarred for life. They will be stigmatized by society because they will look very odd with reconstructive surgery. Children with literally brain matter coming out of their heads because of skull fractures is so penetrating. Children with amputations, lower limb, both legs gone. Another child over there who I'm not even sure is alive or not. And then when it comes to children, there is nothing more that pulls the heartstrings than looking at babies in a neonatal unit. Now, many of you will have seen these. These were not shown on Western media for a very long time. So these are children in the intensive care unit, in the NICU, which is the neonatal intensive care unit in Gaza, that were taken out of their cots, put together in aluminium foil, which you can't see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There were 30 of these children all in one big cot, which normally holds 3, 4 children at a time. 30 of them all put together to keep themselves warm. And these videos, one of them you can see actively having seizures in the video because he's a neonate and he's not getting the support he needs. And this was as a direct result of no electricity reaching these hospitals because of power cuts, because of Israeli bombardment of generators, and no fuel being allowed in because it will fund Hamas rockets, right? And then we think that's the worst of it. And then we see this a week later. This is Al-Nasser Children's Hospital. This is investigative journalists going back in, having left it for a week, and finding the rotting bodies of babies and children inside the hospital, on hospital beds, left to rot to death, literally. Because these were children these doctors were told at gunpoint, you leave now or you get shot. You leave these children or you get shot. And for them, they thought, well, maybe I can help more children. So they had to leave. There was no choice for them. And what they found was a horror scene. I've not actually seen the unblurred footage. I don't want to see it, but I can imagine it's horrific. So decomposing bodies of babies, seen in footage from abandoned children's hospital. It made it onto Sky News eventually, a week later. Women and maternity care, another humongous area that pulls the heartstrings. 50,000 women were pregnant in Gaza at the moment. 10,000 babies have been delivered in the last 2 months. In the north of Gaza, there is literally no no maternal care. So imagine any of you who are pregnant or have spouses that are pregnant. Imagine your wife or your spouse finding that they have no access to maternity care, no scans, no checks, nothing for 9 months of pregnancy. You have no idea how that baby is going to come out. And then on the day that they come out, they're born in a shelter on the streets in the rubble because there are no hospitals in the north of Gaza that can actually accommodate them. That is a reality for women in Gaza. And this video is not working, but this was in The Guardian the other day. Quadruplets, which you might be able to see, quadruplets born to women in a shelter. She gave birth to 4 babies. In the UK, that happens in a tertiary level neonatal unit. You do not give birth to quadruplets in the street, let alone in your home. But this is what is happening in Gaza. Again, a direct result of the targeting of hospitals. Now, moving on from maternal child health, water or disease spread and the risk of communicable diseases. So you can see this footage. This is from the OCHA, which tells you about the areas that have had water damage and the areas that where people had no access to clean water. We know that water sanitation plants were bombed. We know that they are dysfunctioning. We know that people are struggling to drink clean water in Gaza. What does that lead to? Disease spread amid water and sewage crisis. Cholera feared. I'm 100% sure there is cholera inside Gaza. There's no testing for it because none of the labs are able to provide samples or to test for it. There are no labs that are doing it. There is definitely cholera there, no doubt. We've heard of children dying from dehydration, from gastroenteritis, from diarrhea. That only happens in these sort of situations. The disease could be a bigger killer than bombs in Gaza, the WHO said. Excess mortality, which The Lancet published on by Zaina Jamaluddin, a fantastic researcher, she published that, the expected deaths, the 20,000, the 30,000, whatever the disputed numbers are, this will be dwarfed by what's coming. What's coming is hundreds of thousands of people perishing from lack of water, lack of food, lack of supplies. Food, the Integrated Food Security IPC Council comes out and says that all of Gaza, all of it, everything in red, is under what they call acute risk of famine, high levels of food insecurity, the highest levels in the world ever seen right now. 2.8 million people, 2.08 million people, 90% of that population have been classified as phase 3 or above. And phase 3 is crisis mode. So 90% of people are unable to eat a single meal a day. That means they have to fast every other day. Not sunnah, just out of compulsion. Airstrikes on bakeries add to catastrophic food shortage. We've seen this, bakeries being bombed. There is no better way to starve a population than to bomb their bakeries, bomb their water sanitation plants, and reduce their fuel going in. It's a fantastic tactic. The targeting of healthcare facilities. This is where I'm very passionate about, and I'll explain why. So what we have seen in this war, which is, I think, quite different to many other conflicts inside Gaza, is the number of hospitals, the number of healthcare facilities that have been targeted day in, day out. This was happening before, don't get me wrong. This was happening in 2007, 8, 9, 10. Every year it's happened, but not on this scale. Al-Shifa Hospital, 3rd of November, a convoy of ambulances targeted by Israel outside the hospital. Bodies lying littered around, healthcare workers, MSF staff just bombed. Al-Rantisi Paediatric Hospital, 5th of November. Footage shows substantial damage to the 3rd floor and parts of the 2nd floor. This was, I remember the footage of women and men and children just running because the top had been struck by an air shell. The Indonesian Hospital, 9th of November. The bombardment of the hospital. And let us not forget Al-Ahli Hospital in November, which was bombed with 500 casualties, one single airstrike with 10,000 people sheltering in the hospital grounds, 500 dead in 1 second. Al-Nasser Children's Hospital, again, extensive damage, holes in the wall, snipers acting. The Palestinian Medical Relief Center, PMRS, who I work closely with, for the rehabilitation of the disabled. They even bomb disabled people. I mean, it's beyond. This was so horrific that it led to Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, coming out for the first time in their history and saying, this is unacceptable. They have never made a political statement on this scale before, but they had to. They wrote an open letter to the UK government on 2 occasions. They called for the indiscriminate violence and collective punishment of Palestinians to stop. MSF, apolitical, non-partisan. So I'm going to talk about a couple of other things with this. These are some of the doctors and healthcare workers who've been abducted and illegally detained by Israeli occupation forces on their travel from the north to the south. 106 of them, as far as I know, maybe more, 110 so far have disappeared. No one knows where they are. No one knows if they're alive or dead. And then the healthcare workers are being killed. 340 so far. How long do you have? Okay, can you give me 2 more minutes? So I'll just mention Dr. Omar Abdel-Mannan. I know him personally. He was Dean of the Faculty of Medicine at the Islamic University, director of Dar al-Hikmah. He was killed with his wife and 30 members of his family, his daughter, his grandchildren on the 15th of October, Allah yarham. And these are all, I'm sorry to skip through these, but these are all people who are being killed. Quickly, I just want to talk about what work have we done so far. So some of you will know Gaza Medic Voices. This is a social media platform that was set up by myself and 2 of my colleagues who have been out of Gaza since 2011 many times. It's the voice of the doctors, the voice of the silence, and the medics and the nurses saying exactly what they are seeing. These are some of the quotes. You feel free to follow it. It's at Gaza Medic Voices on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Then, moving on from that, as the healthcare workers, we started holding vigils outside 10 Downing Street and across the UK. Again, I won't be able to play this video because of time, but you can follow us on Health Workers for Palestine. This is some of the footage from some of our protests. We held protests and vigils everywhere. Sydney, London, Cape Town, all these cities in the UK. This happens every Friday, every week. Thousands of healthcare workers are standing side by side to commemorate and remember the killed healthcare workers. And across the world. What's amazing, these are all Turkish cities, 30 Turkish cities, all acting every week. And then these are the other countries across the globe. You can see 5 continents represented. I'll skip this. Okay, so to wrap up, where do we go next? So we keep talking about the day after, right? The day after the ceasefire. I had a thought last night, and I thought, what happens if the day after never comes? Because there is a genuine fear that there is no day after. The day after will be Gaza is obliterated, or Gaza is occupied, and 2.3 million people have gone into Egypt. And what is left is 10 cities in the Sinai. So there is that possibility, but that's worst case scenario. Let's stick with best case scenario. Best case scenario is a ceasefire. We can go back in. What do we need? What do they need? They need aid, fuel, food, water. And who are the people providing that? So medical aid will be Medical Aid Palestinians, Doctors Without Borders, and Fajr, who's a fantastic orthopedic charity that I've been working for and heading their UK operations, that are also recruiting teams to go in. And then there'll be the rebuild process, and that will need engineers, architects, every field, every side. And I just put the slide in this morning because many of you will have heard, this is the worst case scenario, I think, and this is where we are headed. This is clearly an attempt to escalate this into a regional war, to draw Hezbollah in, to draw Lebanon in. And when you've got Lebanon being attacked, we'll be holding vigils for Lebanese people, not just for Gazans. And Gaza will be forgotten. I mean, for me, it's a clear distraction tactic. You start a war with Hezbollah, and meantime, you continue your atrocities in Gaza and you wipe out the population. That's how I see it. Maybe I'm conspiratorial. I don't know. You tell me. So just one quick shout out. This is Fajr Scientific. It's an excellent charity. If you want to donate, they've sent in a team of 100 surgeons into Gaza in August before the war. They performed 150 orthopedic operations across 3 hospitals. They are building a team which we have recruited now, many surgeons, many NDT, who are multiple specialties, who are going to go in and do a needs assessment. And as soon as there's a ceasefire, everything is set up. And then they are going to basically, again, in the best case scenario, man field hospitals for 2 years continuously with rotating staff every month to provide surgical, specialist, pediatric surgical care, whatever you name it. So either check them out, Fajr Scientific, or feel free to donate if it's something you want to. And I just want to end on my heroes and the people. The heroes are actually the people in Gaza, the healthcare workers there. But my heroes from like years gone by are these people who inspired me. Sir Terence English, Sir Ian Chalmers, Jan Chalmers, Nick Dudley, Professor Colin Green, the late Nick Dudley, and Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan. These people have been instrumental in my journey to come to the realization that Gaza is my passion and Palestine is my passion. And the healthcare workers that I mentioned, these guys are in Gaza at the moment. They are part of our team. They are inside at the moment. This is a picture taken from yesterday. Someone made a joke and said, food and electricity, where the hell are you in Gaza? And it's true. This is a team that is the Health Workers for Palestine group. There's a team of 500 volunteers. This is the London contingency. We held meetings and webinars every week after our vigils. And again, this is after our first ever vigil on the 10th of November, we had Dr. Hossein Zomlot, many of you will recognize, the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Nick Maynard, who is a hero of mine and someone who is inside Gaza now, a surgeon in Oxford, and many, many others. So a big thank you to them, and a big thank you to the people that have been helping Rahaf and many others that have been so instrumental, Amira, Dr. Amara, because they're online, so I need to give them a shout out. And so many people in every city that have been helping. Thank you so much for your time, and this is my email if you have any further questions. Happy to take any questions.